Good morning. I'm Sam Albrecht, Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. This is the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for November 12th, 2025. We are going to talk about the implementation of Senate Bill 25-002 today. I am going to share my screen and we'll go through some housekeeping slides and then we'll dive into the agenda. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. So welcome everybody. This is our first meeting in November. We have another one a little later in the month. We're going to go over some ground rules for the public. We'll talk about some of our resources that we have available, and then we'll talk about Rulemaking 1, Rulemaking 1.5, Rulemaking 2, and, excuse me, and then we'll talk about some next steps, and then we'll wrap up the meeting. And as I said previously, we're talking about Senate Bill 25-002. Couple ground rules for the public. As you know, these are public meetings and we do advertise them widely because we want as much stakeholder interested party awareness and interested party feedback. We appreciate your participation in this implementation process. Excuse me. We recommend typing your questions in the chat or virtually raising your hand if you would like to speak. And as always, we give priority to our Technical Advisory Committee members in order to get through the business that we need to get through. If you have any written comments that you'd like to submit with respect to this meeting, please send those to me at sam.albrecht@state.co.us. This recording will be posted to the Technical Advisory Committee website or webpage, and we will also post a copy of the final slides. Resources for folks, if they ever need to go back to some source documentation, is the actual bill itself, Senate Bill 25-002. And then also a link into our LexisNexis link to our Colorado Revised Statute. We are governed by 2432, 3301 to 3329. And then a link to our administrative rules, and then the Building Codes and Standards website and the Technical Advisory Committee website. All these are hot links that you can find on the slide deck. So Rulemaking 1, brief update. We had our public hearing and in front of the State Housing Board, and the State Housing Board unanimously approved the draft language in Rulemaking 1, which was the addition of the business entity installers and a couple other updates for installers, and then allowing single exits in certain multifamily structures. We had one public comment. Rocky Mountain Home Association came online and said that they appreciated the addition of business entities and appreciated the work the TAC was doing on Senate Bill 25-002. We'll make, if anybody's interested in that complete package from the State Housing Board, that recording will be on the State Housing Board website, and we can just reach out to us and we'll get you a link to that. It was a pretty short meeting. I was very pleased that it went very well. I think that is a testament to the outreach and the thoughtfulness and thoroughness that we're putting into these rulemaking hearings. The next steps for Rulemaking 1 are we send it off to the Attorney General's office for legal review. We are waiting to hear back from them, and then we will publish the adopted rules in the Colorado Register on December 10th. And then we are going to have an interested parties meeting on rolling out that those rules to the industry on December 18th. And the effective date for those rules will be December 31st. And we'll get those updated rules. We'll get the tentative rules and the updated rules up on the Building Codes and Standards website pretty quick. All right, rulemaking 1.5. This is where we're going to start getting into some of the more complex parts of the bill. And this section of rulemaking is going to focus on the third-party agencies, plan reviews, and audits. The schedule for this, if we're going to look at a target end date of March 17th to make these rules effective, is to get that comprehensive draft proposed rules sent to TAC and interested parties. We're not probably going to get those draft proposed rules out today. It'll be by the end of the week. And then November 26th, our TAC meeting, we will focus our efforts on that, in addition to working some of the rulemaking 2 information on the regional design standards that we are working with Schumann Coda Associates, SCA, on. We don't want to lose any time on that, but that'll be the 2 big things to discuss for the 11/26 meeting. December 1st, we'll file that notice for rulemaking. January 20th will be the State Housing Board meeting to consider adoption of rulemaking 1.5. And again, everything flows out of that January 20th adoption date. And we're looking at a March 17th implementation date for that. So we want to dive in just a little bit, and I know some folks have to leave early, so I'm going to kind of roll through some of these things as we talk about rulemaking 1.5 so that we can focus on that design criteria. And we have some slides that were added to the slide deck. I think not the slide deck copy that you got, but we will get those slides out and on the website very, very soon. And Andre, I think, is going to lead us through those. So a couple things in plan reviews and third-party agencies and final approvals. The big thing is a couple big things there. One is the allowance for the Division of Housing to use a third party for final plan review and approval, and we are going to work on that section. And then the process for third-party plan approval for manufacturers to start construction. As you know, we have had a requirement that manufacturers send their plans to third-party agencies prior to our final approval before construction starts. So this is a major change in the way we're doing business. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that will work. Currently, these sections of our process is covered in our rules 415 through 425. We're going to talk a little bit about how that might change and some proposals to do that. And then the other big piece is to discuss what our audit will look like for third-party approved plans. We want to make sure that we still have the right to review plans as necessary and come up with some type of audit schedule that we can share with the manufacturers and the third-party agencies. As you know, in order to get an asset out of Salesforce, we are going to, you'd have to submit a plan set, whether it's approved or whether it's in a draft for us to review. And so we're still going to require that. We think it's important to have a set of approved drawings for every every asset that's created in Salesforce in order for us to finish our inspections, and in case there is any type of complaints that come up with that we have the set of approved drawings. So now this will be after July 1st of 26. This will be the regional, these construction drawings will be designed to the regional design criteria and standards as we approve in rulemaking 2, but we still are going to require that copy of the plans to be submitted through Salesforce. So some things we want to, and we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, we want the ability, the rules must account for the following, and I've mentioned the first one there, for us to contract with an approved third party. We want to take a look at whether we might need to contract with more than one, because if we have a third party agency, doesn't make sense for, especially during the audit process, if we're looking for a third-party agency to audit something, to audit their own plans that they've approved. So we're going to take a look at that. And then the process for third parties to obtain approval from the Division of Housing, Building Codes and Standards in order to do that final approval plan. We want to make sure that we have third-party agencies that have the qualified personnel in order to do plan reviews, right? And then I mentioned auditing too. So this is just another layer of what it is we're trying to do. So we want to talk a little bit about qualification. We have talked in last meeting too about qualifications and experience, the audit process, the enforcement, suspension or revocation. If we start seeing a TPA provide plans that are that have errors in them consistently, what the cost might look like, and then the time to review and approve plans. Who can use TPAs for approval, and the best practices from other states. So who can be a TPA? Our definition of rules says that a quality assurance representative means any state, firm, corporation, or other entity that proposes to conduct production reviews, evaluate a manufacturer's quality control processes, and perform design evaluations. So this is a fairly comprehensive definition of a QA rep and what all that they can do we can allow states, local governments, firms, and other approved entities. Are there any other entities that we should consider? And then we're going to talk about certifications, accreditations, or licenses, and then special consideration for certain TPA approvals. I'm going to pause just a second and see if anybody has any initial thoughts on where we're headed, or any thoughts they would like to share with the group at this point. Any questions so far? Thoughts, comments?
Sam, it's Nate.
Hey, Nate.
The only thing I would say is the language being the and part of it. I can see there being, an engineering design firm, an architect firm that would like to do plan reviews, but they don't want to do quality assurance manual reviews and production reviews. Right. And so as long as, the way it's listed is they have to do all of them.
And I would say we are going to factor that into our recommended rules, that they can do what they want. And there may be qualifications for those that are wanting to do plan reviews only. There may be those that want to do only do manufacturer on-site construction inspections. So we are going to accommodate that, Nate. Good
Great.
point. Any other thoughts?
Hey, Sam, it's Donnie.
Hey, Donnie.
Yeah, I was just going to say that currently in rule, when a TPA applies for approval, they select what they want to do. So they'll let us know if they only want to do inspections, or if they only want to do plan reviews, or both, or more than that, QA reviews, things like that. So if we continue that, then it wouldn't be any different than what we're doing right now.
Right. Thank you. So we have visited with some other states, and 6 other states we've talked to and have gotten information from. And so it is a wide variety of, as you would expect, of state programs and how they manage their third-party agencies. And so we're going to take what was going to work best for the state of Colorado and consolidate that and move that forward. And as you know, one of the resources that I put in that chat, or that I talked about, and it's in this slide deck, is our state statute, right? So state statute defines some things we can do and can't do, and that's true in every state, right? So that's why we see the wide variation of of the different approaches and techniques and reliance upon third-party agencies to do different phases, if not all, inspections for the state in question. So we want to make sure that we come up with the best solution for Colorado, and we are getting that narrowed down. And like I said, by the end of the week, we should either have an outline of a couple of possibilities for you to consider.
That she had been talking to you and Phil about GIS.
Sean, are you talking to us? I'm sorry, I may have talked over you. Okay. And Virginia audits every 10th third-party agency approved plan, option audit every 5th approved plan. California just audits monthly reports of what's submitted by third-party agencies that have the final approval to submit to approve construction drawings. California doesn't audit TPA approved plans, but it does conduct compliance-based audits, complaint-based audits. And it's interesting that the state of California really has only had 12 complaints in 2024. Dean, you got your hand up?
Yeah, Sam, I just had a question on that. I when I previewed the slide deck last night, I saw that. Did they indicate where the complaints come from? Are they coming from like on-site inspectors or jurisdictions or neighbors? What's the source of those 12 complaints? Do you know?
Well, it wasn't neighbors. It generally fell in the categories that we assumed, and that was installation concerns as well as construction deficiencies and defects. And I think the majority of those that they look at came into the construction deficiencies and defects category.
Were they filed by the homeowners though, or were they inspectors, or who was picking up on the issues that were submitted?
That's a good question, Mo, and I don't have the answer for that. We'll try to dig that, dive down into that on whether, but my understanding is these were consumer complaints, because that's what we were talking about when we explained our consumer complaint program. Okay. So just as a graphic, there's we could audit everything. I don't think that that's a necessary requirement. We could only audit complaints. To me, there's a sweet spot that's someplace in the middle. And I think I have a slide coming up that talks a little bit about that. So again, with our audit process, and that's kind of what we're talking about now, what percentage of third-party approved plans should be audited per year to ensure confidence and transparency? What grading or scoring system could be adopted to score the audits, right? If they're minor typos or minor red lines, how do we assign a point? And then maybe it's 1 point for that and 2 points for life and safety issues, or I'm sorry, 2 points for major issues, and then 3 points for life and safety points. And then we're talking about whether should we just limit our audit of the plan review itself, or do we want to audit the third-party agency as a whole? And maybe that's a point if we're seeing recurring problems coming through. And then, of course, the fee schedule. How do we charge for the audits, and how do we get reimbursed for the time of our audit teams that are doing this type of stuff? The next slide is still talking about audits and whether TPA approved plans should be audited once when applying for certification. If the third-party agency wants to be an approved, a certified third-party agency, and then frequency, maybe it's annual, right? Maybe it's every time there's a code set change. We could take a look at a couple things there. And of course, we'll take any comments that may come up from the Technical Advisory Committee regarding suspension and revocation. The other thing I want to talk about that ties with some of this is the reorganization of the administrative rules. We think that there should be a chapter separate to TPAs. Right now, all our TPA information is kind of in that section 4 or chapter 4, which is the manufacturers chapter. We're actually thinking about creating a new chapter right after chapter 4 to talk about a third-party agency a section and a third-party agency registration and the process for them to apply for the specialties that they want to provide for the state of Colorado. So this is what Chapter 5 might look like. The eligibility piece of it, the scope of services, plan reviews, approvals, in-plant inspections, installation inspections, and then certification and renewals for those third-party agencies, third-party agency performance standards and monitoring and audits, just a statement on conflicts of interest, independence, and auditing reporting obligations, and then transitions and changes if key personnel change at the third-party agency, we feel like we should know about it, and then enforcement actions. I'm going to pause here for just a second and see if anybody has any thoughts on a separate chapter for third-party agencies. Okay. Sam, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just about third party in general. So I'm kind of hearing that I think the state would like to not, be able just to use the third party and have them take care of the whole plan review, issuance of permit, and then inspection. But that really, then you really do need to audit a lot more, I think, to make sure that things are going as the state wants. On the local level, I look at every third-party permit that they've looked at. There's certain things that we have to look at for the local, but just to make sure. Some you have much more trust with, but I don't think we should. 100% might be a lot, but I think third parties should know everyone has a chance of being looked at.
Yep.
I know that's not what you're asking on this one, but thinking about it, I'm kind of thinking I wouldn't, especially with stuff being in manufactured homes or modular homes. A lot of them are made out of state where the rules could, I think that would be giving up a lot, is my opinion.
So I think we're on the same page, Sam. It is not our intent to get rid of our plan reviewers. We want to continue to keep them very heavily involved in the audits. And then we also still want to allow manufacturers to directly submit plans to us in case they would prefer to use us than a third-party agency. There may be scenarios with startup manufacturers or smaller manufacturers or larger manufacturers that are in a crunch to have some third-party, to have the Division of Housing to do the final review and approval of that set of construction drawings. So we want to keep our options open. Finding that number is one number that I've thrown out, and I don't remember if I have a slide on this or not, is 20% of every new plan that comes from a manufacturer, and 10 for a registered manufacturer, and maybe 10% for a certified manufacturer that has proven themselves. And of course, maybe that number goes up a little bit more with a code set change, right? So the other thing that we're looking at is also possibly, and I'm seeing a lot of hands going up, so that's good, is in that filing fee for the manufacturer to create the asset and file the final plan with us is that there is enough in there that we have the capacity and the capability to pull more if we need to, right? We know at least for the first year with the new regional design standards and criteria that we're putting in place, that may be a special area of concern that we need to pay some special attention to, right? We have found that most of our uh, plans that are sent back for revision have dealt with design criterias at the regional level. So, I'm sorry, at the local jurisdiction level. So we know that it is the primary source of getting stuff sent back. And Sam, that may be what you were alluding to when you say you look at everything because there's certain things that you need to look at. And if you see the wrong wind or snow load, you throw up a red flag, right? Which is
Well,
absolutely.
and just local jurisdictions do have their own, I mean, we water sewer tap fees. I mean, to be honest, we use Shums Code we have Colorado Code, Pete Tyree before that. I mean, on almost everything that's not a single family dwelling, mainly just have another sets of eyes looking at it. And it's
Yep.
always at the applicant or the, whatever the builders, it's on their nickel, not ours. But I just think that giving up because I mean, and I get thanks. I mean, often. I mean, the I today I have a couple. I'm refereeing stuff between Shams Coda and a developer. I mean, we do it all the time. This is before it's even been done. So I just wouldn't give up that ability to look at everyone if you wanted to, if somebody asked or whatever else. I know personnel is a big deal. I get that, and that's why you use consultants. But consultants are out, in my opinion, are another set of, and actually a lot of set of eyes looking at a project, which I think is very important, and
Yeah,
and even more so on maybe on a modular or manufactured structure. So
yep. And so if I gave the intent, we might be giving up the right to audit every single plan, uh, or any plan that we randomly choose. That is not our intent at all.
fair enough. I just was, I
Yeah.
sort of felt like seeing that one graphic. It was,
I
well,
know, and so that was just to me, both are an extreme, right? From one end to
yeah,
the other. We need to find that happy middle, and if we can make that a slider where we can pick the frequency, uh, and then there's just the normal, maybe just a normal audit process too. Because you talked about staffing, is that the manufacturers want to know what their cost is going to be and what their normal audit cycle might be. And so that's where I'm looking at a blend of, so a registered factory plan on 20% that you're going to have to pay for us to audit. And a certified factory, it's 10%. And then that filing fee that we collect for every asset that comes in, is not going to just be for file storage, but it's also going to be for other audits as necessary, that we may have to do.
up front. Yeah,
Yep,
good.
up
I
front,
understand.
right? Yep,
Well,
it's
thank you.
straightforward. Yep. I'm going to go across the screen in the order that I see them. Donnie, you want to go next, and then Tim, and then Dean?
Yeah, just for clarification, the bill allows us to use a third party to approve plans on our behalf, and then also allows a manufacturer to utilize a third party who's been approved to approve plans on our behalf. And I think if we did something similar for our inspection process, because our inspection process and in-plant inspections, that is a inspection and an audit, right? So that's kind of how the manufacturing process works. Is we go in, we'll do a specific inspection, but we're also there to audit their QA/QC process. So, maybe setting a minimum requirement, saying like, hey, maybe it is 10 or 20% of the plans that you submit that year. That is the minimum amount that we would audit. And if we see that there's issues, then we can increase that frequency. right? So our current inspection process is that way. We'll go in, we'll do an in-plant inspection, a minimum of 2 inspections, the rough and the final. But if we see that there's issues with their QA process, then we can increase that frequency and say, hey, we're going to be here for every single stage of construction until we feel that we're comfortable enough to allow you to continue with the minimum 2 inspections. So, but that's an important part of these discussions is we need to have those talks of what those minimum requirements are, because I think the idea is not to allow anybody to do TPA approvals, to set a minimum standard for who can do those, so that we can set the bottom line of who do we trust to do these inspections? What kind of qualifications can we agree on that these individuals can do these types of inspections or plan reviews, so that we're not having to question and the locals aren't having to question, right? I think that's an important part of having local jurisdictions as part of this TAC team is you're speaking on behalf of a lot of locals. Like what at your level would you accept as qualified? So if you guys can think about those qualifications when we're putting these together, that'll help us out. I think the ICC 210. I can't remember which one it is that has the TPA stuff in there. It might be 1205, not 210, but 1205 or 1210. One of those ones has the minimum what they recommend. So let's take a look at those. That's it.
Thanks, Donnie. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I think the initial question started out, Sam, is do we feel that it's a good idea to do this standalone chapter? And yes, absolutely. I think it is to start, listing whatever it's 5.1 through 7, if that is inclusive, and then flushing out the requirements. So absolutely, I think it makes it a lot more transparent to everyone involved, the locals, manufacturers, and your staff. And it also, I think, would make it easier to modify a rule, that was a question mark. So if this becomes a rule set up in Chapter 5, to modify a rule, what does that look like again, if you could remind me?
So to modify a rule, we have to go through a rulemaking process, right? So plan on 4 months, the best that we can do, unless it's an emergency rule. And if you remember, we did an emergency rule to work with the city of Denver on their homelessness declaration of emergency and the allowance to use their standards for their sleeping shelters in that state of emergency. So there are ways to fast track that. Now, with that said, we have the capability, and we have done it in the past, to require letters of modification or letters of clarity, or consider them processes or procedures on how to take it down a level from the rule level for the implementation piece. So what I would see, for example, the point was brought up on if we have a TPA that hits a certain threshold, if we want to increase that audit number, we would send them a letter, or we would notify them of their increased threshold. We might not, we might go with the baseline in the administrative rule, but protect the option to modify that for specific third-party agencies as necessary based on the reviews of their audits, right? And then we would send a letter out to that effect. Does that kind of help address your question?
Yeah, it does. And just more of the basic rule would be in Chapter 5, and then the next level would be policy and procedure, which can be modified as needed from your staff and not having to take it back to TAC or through the rulemaking process. I think that'd be the important part to maintain, to give the most flexibility.
Yeah, and so when we craft this, the rules themselves, we factor that in, right? For example, we've always had the ability of agents of manufacturers to submit plans straight to us, but because of staffing challenges and workflows. It got a little challenging, and then we sent out a policy saying that they needed to have a third-party agency's approval first before they came to us. And then we backed off that a little bit and said, hey, we're open to providing certified manufacturers to submit plans straight to us and skip the third-party agency piece. And so we have that flexibility in our policies and procedures, and that's what we want to make sure we protect.
Perfect. And then just a final comment of frequency. I think from a certified, once a firm company is certified to do that, to do TPA plan reviews, then, in that neighborhood of 10 to 20%, but absolutely, I would say anytime we have a code change, which is how I similarly do it in my office. And I think you pointed out, especially modifying or changing over to the regional, that our goal is here. I think that would automatically trigger initial audits. So at least at this point, those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts here, and I guess I would lead off with I agree fully with Tim. Having a separate chapter for this makes all the sense in the world, but there's going to be a lot of nuance to this, and even right out of the gate, when you're talking about balancing the variables of, is it a complaint based or is there some cadence to it? I'd like to kind of circle back just for my own benefit and maybe all of our benefit, but we all may be looking at third-party agency review through a lens of, oh, wow, this is a good thing, but maybe for very different reasons. If I'm a factory, maybe I'm thinking, oh, okay, this can speed up the process to permit. But if I'm the state, maybe I'm not thinking about the speed of process to permit. Maybe I'm thinking about staffing capacity and long-term capability to keep up with a growing industry that might be, twice as many plan submittals a year or two from now than it is today. And how do we do that with a limited number of resources? So I often try to look at problems like this through the lens of, can we get clarity on what exactly the problem is we're trying to solve, and then let that be the North Star to how we can tackle each one of these rules in the rulemaking? Because if our goal is speed, then we need to be really conscious of making sure that that's the objective. If the goal is capacity, then that's a different objective. If the goal is predictability, if the goal is cost, I mean, these are all various elements that I think are important. And I think everybody on the call can probably agree that most of us can look at a set of plans and immediately identify this one's going to be trouble, versus a well-prepared. And I think a lot of that too is because you're also speaking to a rulemaking that is trying to address everything from a single family home, which under the state of Colorado doesn't even require a licensed professional to be involved with, to, a multi-story type 3 hospitality project or multifamily project that's going to have an entire team of licensed professionals that are involved with it and everything in between. So with that being said, I don't know if even there might be some benefit of qualifying the third party process under an IRC and an IBC context, because those are two totally different sets of plans with two different sets of required professional involvement. So anyway, all of that, I don't know if that was clear enough, but it would be nice to know, like, what is our North Star here? What's the problem that we're solving, and let's make sure we solve it with this.
Dean, I like the way you think. And we did that with rulemaking 1. We said, we have heard the industry. They've been asking for business entities for years to have more than one installer per business entity. And we were able to get that change in statute. And so that was our North Star for that, right? Was to increase the capacity and allow more installers to be registered and certified and under the business, and some of those being under the business entity canopy, right? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the North Star on that one. The single exit staircase in certain jurisdictions our North Star on that one was we need to have a level playing field for modulars that qualify for this type of exception, just like the law was specifically addressed to on-site construction, right? It didn't mention our statutes at all. So we took that upon ourselves to create that level playing field. I would say that, and so I made myself a note that we will address future rulemakings in identifying the problem that we're having and what we're trying to do. And I would say that this part of 002 has three primary points, and we'll send these out in notes to the tag. One is to align the state of Colorado's factory built structure program with industry best practices. What have we seen in other states that have worked out well? And that's what we've heard from manufacturers is, why are you doing it this way when 49 other states do it the other way? So and that's an exaggeration. But it emphasizes the point. Is there a better way of doing business, and can we align with that in order to make the state of Colorado's program even better? The second one is, can we reduce cost and timelines for the manufacturers? And so having their design professionals develop the plans, payment to a third-party agency, and then submittal to the state for us to review and approve, that might be too much, right? And it also ties to that first bullet I just mentioned just a little bit. But let's see if we can do that. Now, we have also heard from certain manufacturers that are now using us for direct plan review submittal is, my TPA is taking 30 days every time I submit them a plan. Can you guys do it in 3 weeks? And so you mentioned, and I'm not sure you mentioned that. I think you mentioned the alternative is, can third-party agencies do it faster? Maybe, but that's not what we hear all the time, right? And so we want to protect that capacity for us to continue to do direct plan submittals for whatever reason, right? Because we'll have qualified plan reviewers on staff. And then the third bullet on that, and this is actually should maybe be the first priority, because these are not in a rank order in any way, shape, or form, is to ensure public safety. We want to make sure that our buildings, that we're doing as thorough a job as every local jurisdiction out there, and looking and making sure that that our product, and I'm speaking for us as a whole, for everybody that's on this call dealing with factory built structures, is just as safe as the on-site built construct product. Does that make sense? Dean,
Yeah, it does. And so when we talk about cost and timelines, because I think that's probably the thing that most clients, factories, design teams are focused on to get through the process in a predictable manner. Questions will come up. Like immediately on this call, Donnie had mentioned how an in-factory inspection process is also a QA/QC audit. Well, my head immediately jumps to this and says, okay, well, if we have an audit of 10% or 20% or whatever magic number it might be, is every manufacturer sitting there holding their breath, hoping that project doesn't get audited? Because if it does, it sends it down an alternate path that will take an extra month. And I don't think the industry can and should need to have to tolerate that, like unpredictability. But on the other hand, if you decide to flag a project to audit, well, do you go ahead and pass it through to permit? And if the audit picks up problems, now we knowingly have permitted a project that has plan review issues. Like I don't know how that gets resolved either. So we need to be really careful here, because I think time is extremely important to I mean, I don't want to speak for factories, but we get to see it and live it every day with them on factory, the importance of maintaining the schedule and when a project goes online, And if anything delays that permit in hand for them to be able to start to build their product, that's going to be a major problem. And so we could go through all this rulemaking effort, and then nobody will actually go down that road because it's too unpredictable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, that makes sense, Dane. And we don't want to, so it gets into a challenge for us to protect the options, like we just talked about a little bit with Sam and Tim, right? While not making it such a complex, burdensome process that nobody wants to build for Colorado. It's a delicate line that we'll balance. So keep us honest on that as we move forward. Okay. All
Sounds
right.
good.
Let me go to the next slide. Just to go back and I'm getting ready to give this to Andre in just a couple minutes. Region 2, Rulemaking 2, the contents that we're going to have to work on there is that the regions and the design criteria, local government inspections, just making sure that we continue that relationship, and Donnie and I are going back and forth if we need a separate chapter for local governments, or if we just put them into the sections of the responsibility sections that they have. We'll take input on that at a future call. That responsibility parties matrix, which also ties to that, and then contractor registration and education. We're reaching out to a couple of different potential education sources for that. And we have talked to some of the other states on how they're doing that contractor registration. Colorado's doing it in a fairly unique way. If the GC and on-site contractors are already registered by the local jurisdiction, they're not going to have to register with the state, but they may need some factory built structure education. And then for those contractors that are not currently in a licensing situation with a local jurisdiction, our licensing would be statewide for them to utilize in any area of the state that does not require local contractor registration. And then accessibility, I threw this back in here because way back when we started the TAC, we talked about some of the challenges with 9-5 on accessibility versus I think it was 1237 that requires us to be within it, enforce the accessibility requirements of at least the last two adopted building code set, which we 21 and 24. We're on 21 now, so we are compliant, but as soon as 27 is adopted, then we might not be compliant unless there's been no change in the accessibility requirements between 21 and 24. So if we can get some bandwidth, we'll take a look at that also. Just that Rulemaking 2 schedule again. Our North Star here is June 30th, 2026. To have all this stuff done, and this chart just provides the flow down into that Rulemaking 2. And just wanted to shout out to the communications team and my team on we are sharing this information widely for you building department officials. If you get calls from your commissioners or your county managers or whoever it may be, it's probably because they're starting to hear from us. We actually made a presentation at the Economic Development Council of Colorado. Nate was with me on that panel, along with a couple other folks talking about factory built structures. We're reaching out to Colorado Municipal League, CCI, Colorado Counties Incorporated, the Colorado Association of Home Builders, and the Home Builders Association of Metro Denver. We met with them. the Colorado City and County Managers Association, Counties and Commissioners Acting Together, CCAT, if some of you are familiar with those, and then the Association of Colorado County Administrators. So we're sending news and update blurbs to all these organizations. We want to make sure that we also get that out through CCICC, and we're trying to add them to the list on our distribution and outreach. So we don't want any surprises when I say Rulemaking 1 went well, but I think that's because we really had a really good outreach program and that we gave everybody the opportunity to provide comments. And we want to do the same thing for Rulemaking 1.5 and Rulemaking 2. We are trying to shift based on some of our one-on-one feedback and discussions with SHMS CODA and others. We're shifting a little bit to regional design criteria to share information because this is not a separate building code that we're adopting. We've always had our building code, right? So this is how we look at that local design criteria and implement it. And so that we're shifting some of our language to kind of cover that. And just to minimize confusion out there, the building departments know exactly what we're talking about, right? When we get to the county commissioner level and the county manager level, those folks, we need to be very careful how we word it. We're not coming up with an overarching regional building code. We're coming up with regional zones in order to adopt ensure safe quality buildings delivered to every jurisdiction in the state of Colorado. With that, Andre, I think your lead on this. I will advance the slides for you. If maybe you want to introduce your cohorts on the call here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Andre Hayen. I've been a code official in Colorado basically my whole life. I worked with Jefferson County for about 14 years. I was with City of Lakewood before that, and now I'm with SHMS CODA. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to work with the TAC to help facilitate this conversation. Grateful to work with DOH and Sam and Donnie and their team, and able to hopefully bring some context and some information that helps facilitate an easier direction on this conversation about codes. Cole, would you mind jumping in and introducing yourself, sir?
Sure. Hopefully you all can hear me. I'll turn my camera back on. Sorry, I've been had a couple of phone calls I had to take. So, I am the interim Colorado Regional Manager for SHMS CODA. Been in code for roughly 9 years now. Started in about 2017, and have been with SHMS CODA since February. I say marked, but I'm taking over Steve's position for Colorado. So. Been planner, viewer, inspector, you name it, I've probably done it in the code industry. So,
And Stephanie, if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself. Oh, Stephanie, you're on mute, miss.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Stuckemeyer. I'm the operations manager for SHMS CODA. I've been with SHMS CODA for about 10 years now. My background is in project management in the construction industry. So my specialty is not codes, but processes and procedures are. And so that's where I'm helping out the SHMS CODA team with the regional design criteria.
Thank you, guys.
And I will say these are not the only 3 people working on this. They have the entire SHMS CODA team is we're excited to have all the resources of SHMS CODA moving this forward.
Thank you, Sam. Absolutely. So for TAC members, you may see other folks from SHMS CODA filter into these meetings, especially depending on content. So we get the right expertise in the room, kind of paired with the content of the meeting. And so with that, I'll jump into kind of what we have for you today. One of the roles that we really see, and we've really spent a lot of time talking about this with the DOH team, is understanding that clear line between what they're defining as regional design criteria and the definition they put forward you, along with local triggers that are still pertinent to the process for us. And so that's what you kind of have parsed out in front of you today. And we're not married to these terms necessarily. Regional design criteria, I would say, very much has a clear definition. Code triggers is sort of pasta at the wall to see what sticks sticks, and to make sure that this paradigm aligns with the expectations of the TAC in the way that we're going to solicit information and hopefully generate some tools at the end of this that make compliance easier on all sides of the fence kind of associated with this. So we see this as a means to be able to make sure that what we're providing is technically sound, administratively practical, and simultaneously transparent. And so what we see here is the design criteria that Sam's been talking about, looking at regional standardization for, creating those conservative minimums that will be able to be used broadly throughout swaths of the state, based on certain climatic criteria, right? Wind speed, elevation, the kind of things that come to mind when we talk about design criteria. We also recognize that there are practical implications to certain codes and certain requirements that are jurisdictionally specific, what we're calling as code triggers right here. They're not tied specifically to these engineering loads or design parameters. They can be designed for things like our wildfire urban interface, sprinkler systems, some energy code components, things like that. And we're looking to make sure that we have a lens that identifies both. Next slide, please, Sam. So this is, once again, definition just to see kind of what sticks, right? But we're really looking at that ASCE 7 tool and sort of the reference standards that we as code officials have typically relied on for publishing our own code amendments, right, locally through the IRC and the IBC, right? So we're looking at that sort of as its own tier, and this is that first section of Rule 2 that Sam's really putting down and saying, okay, you know, this is what's going to design that regional uniformity that we're looking for. Next slide, please. And the way we're looking at this for code triggers are these specific adopted provisions or amendments that are obligations beyond that criteria that have a significant impact on what could be manufactured and where it could be placed within a jurisdiction, and to make sure that we're getting information that is transparent as we go through this solicitation phase and start to bring some of this information in to substantiate the direction that we have. So typically non-structural, but operationally significant is the way we're looking at these. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of what we're talking about, right? So Wildland Urban Interface or Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. So that's one that's obviously really present in everyone's mind. We're on that clock to have that fully addressed by your local jurisdiction and its amendments. And so with that, we want to make sure that there are key tools being put forward to manufacturers, that they understand the requirements that are going to be associated with potential structure hardening, and also that we're clear with the state model as far as ground truthing, some of the options that they have as far as making those selections of what category that's going to fit in. So we recognize that this is a place where local control really matters and local transparency of information really matters. Radon mitigation is another one, right? And that can be driven from a number of different places in my experience. Sometimes it's health code related and it filters to the building code. Sometimes it's less clear. Sometimes it's dependent on whether or not we have that control from a planning and zoning department or a building department. Residential fire sprinklers, again, one that can be comprehensive and at the same time tricky. We can have local amendments that allow fire districts to make that determination. When I was in Jefferson County, and I see we have somebody from Jefferson County, we had 19 fire districts out there, and some of them varied wildly in terms of their responsivity, their apparatus, right? What they could do, what they couldn't. Some were all volunteer, some were fully professional, right? And that makes some substantial influences on the requirements for sprinklers. Energy code amendments, that's another one that's very present in people's minds. Floodplain compliance, these really, I'm just trying to make sure that we have sort of a list of ideas floating around for the TAC. So if you have something else that comes to mind that you'd like to share with us, we'd very much like to hear it and understand how it fits into our list. Next slide, please. And so the idea here that we're trying to parse out, and some of hopefully the value add that a firm like ours is bringing to this conversation, is the driver's seat is obviously on the regional design criteria and providing that comprehensively. What we want to also do then is be able to provide the locally adopted codes in some specific trigger points like we've identified, so that way they can work in tandem, complementarily, to integrate for easier compliance for the manufacturers, for designers in general, by being able to say, okay, with these particular amendments, we know this particular unit can fit anywhere in this jurisdiction or this region, and have that comprehensibility. Next slide, please. So the implementation concept, right, rather than charted, this is just sort of stated out for you. We're looking at, say, zones 1 through 5. I know that information was already presented to the TAC. What we want to do is make sure that we have this complementary information gathering system that's going to bring information in that makes that very usable and supports that concept because I really do think that that is gaining some legs and is really starting to grow for, what will be a successful model for implementation. After that, we'd like to compile that with mapping that goes over WUI adoption, radon, and sprinklers to have an end product, whether that's a lookup table or a map, but some means for jurisdictions to be able to easily share that information and simultaneously to be able to trace that throughout the state and understand where these particular triggers are going to be, more prevalent and therefore inform the industry effectively. I believe that is the last slide. Oh, one last slide, sorry about that, on the benefits of this concept, right? So we're looking for predictability. We believe this delivers that transparency that we've been talking about, also delivers a level of scalability because the framework can be easily shifted when we parse out between regional design criteria and these other items that do change due to local control. Because what we really want to do is not reduce local control, it's about making it visible and predictable is the way that we're really trying to pair this together. So state parameters with a local registry on this information is going to hopefully make that a lot easier in terms of also future adoption. Because we all know that these codes are in flux. We have multiple triggers coming from state statute currently that are going to evolve building codes very, very quickly. A lot of folks are looking at new adoptions in the new year. So this model we feel is an effective tool to be able to address that. So I want to pause there and kind of, open, any discussion or any items that, folks feel about this particular paradigm and sort of this method of attack.
Now, TAC members, I promised Shums Coda that you guys were not bashful. So now's the time to speak up and kind of hear what your thoughts are as we roll out a further level of detail on how we're taking a look at this. Tim Pate, I knew you were going to hear from you soon.
Yes, sir.
Sam, you beat him to the punch. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. So I listened carefully, Andre, I did. So are you talking about having some sort of a map for manufactured housing that would compile the different, the predictability for the manufacturers or as some sort of a booklet or whatever? Because as you guys well know, is probably better than ever, better than any. Each local jurisdiction, they have, separate situations. I can throw a baseball and hit my county from here, and we have totally different codes. We're in the same spot, but have totally different codes. So how are you going to get this information? Because I believe it should be so. As Sam Albrecht knows, I think we should have a state building code. I think, but that's as Sam said, that's a big elephant and it's a lot of bites. But I do think that how are you going to get this out to the manufacturers? And then the other part is once you get this out to manufactured housing, stick built's or site built's gonna follow. I have a feeling you can't. It becomes. It won't be by itself. But thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll take a bite at that. And Sam, I know we've talked about some of this, so if you feel that there's some other part that you want to share, feel free. But what I'd start with is what we want to make sure is that we can produce a level of evidence that substantiates the direction that we've had here, right? And so what we're planning on doing, we've developed a survey to be sent out. We have some of our staff reaching out to local jurisdictions to solicit this information. And right now we're using sort of all across the state, picking and choosing a number of jurisdictions in order to be able to get that information quickly and in a timely fashion to the TAC. Ultimately, it would be ideal if we get it from every jurisdiction in Colorado. We realize that's a Herculean task. between 400 plus fire districts, and in addition to that, all of the individual jurisdictions, you're talking about a lot of information. So we recognize that some of that is going to be difficult. And with the timeline that we have, the first thing we want to do is make sure that the TAC is reinforced with the information that it needs to make it successful decision making. Long term, there's been discussion of items through maybe state demographer, some of the offices associated in these places where we do want to end up being able to house and have this information for the sake of local industry leaders, for the sake of decision makers. And there's real prudence in it, like you've pointed out, right? Without this, we're kind of flying blind at times. So ultimately, we're going to treat this maybe in a phased approach or incrementally. Our first concern is making sure that you have the information as TAC to be able to make the decisions that you need and substantiate, the direction that you have as far as taking this regionalized approach. After that, though, and that's part of the reason behind this, is we want to right size the information gathering that we're doing. So if you're seeing holes in places besides some of the things that we've talked about, that's exactly what we want to hear now. So that way we can add that to our survey, add that to the information gathering that we're doing, and longitudinally build a better profile of what Colorado looks like for this. There's also no getting around it. Now, I recognize I've worked in jurisdictions where snow load can vary wildly from 30 pounds up to 150. And the idea here is not to get all of that information in one sitting. We do realize that that would be very, very difficult. But if we can map out the areas where local jurisdictions are being very clear that it is site specific, and so are maybe fire sprinklers are evaluated in a site specific method and things like that, that can help us at least have better informative decisions at this stage as we look forward to the future as well of how this will go in perpetuity. Because, this doesn't go away at any point in the future. As we build this, we'll need to continue to build on it and have better information in the long run. Does that answer your question, or am I kind of missing the mark?
No, I that does. I mean, so we're at the inception level and still gathering information, and how you present it down the line will depend, well, on the information.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll jump in too. One of the things that, as we mentioned, and we'll come up with the North Star for the design criteria. I think that's important to keep in mind too. And that is that we realize there may be some over building to, let's just use you as an example, Sam, and I don't think it's going to be a map because we've got too much elevation changes, right, for snow load, right? And so we're going to have to figure out a way to do that. But maybe there is a way to do it with just peaks that pop up, right? For that are, as you go up the mountain, you're moving from snow load zone 3 to snow load zone 4. Or at the top of Pikes Peak, you're at 5, right? Which is going to be site specific. But the other piece of that too is you've got the other design criteria, which SCA and Andre have laid out, is, the wind map is pretty funky looking. And we had this map discussion, right? Here's what I think we need to go. I think, and it's not implied, it's not written in the statute, is the manufacturers want a place to go to find out as they look through where their potential product market is going to be, what a single set of construction drawings to meet the most stringent design criteria that they foresee for a production run, or to file or to keep that plan on file if they want to revisit it, right? So having that, what we're hoping is that when we're done here, we have a set of tables or a set of maps or a set or an interactive search feature based on address that says that, hey, I entered in this address and it's snow load 2, wind load 3, XYZ, right? And hey, we've got a plan for that. Boom, they go, right? They've got an approved plan. They can start construction. And Andre, did I help that or did I confuse it more?
No, I think you're spot on. I think that's the intention of what we're trying to solicit with this information, and eventually kind of parse this out between these two paradigms.
Dean?
Yeah, Andre, appreciate your team's involvement here. This is a huge topic of discussion, as I'm sure you're well aware. And I still have some uncertainty here of the June 30th objective, because we're using terms like most stringent requirements for a particular AHJ, which to me means at the end of this process, in as little as 8 months from now, less than that at this point, we're going to somehow satisfy all 400 plus fire districts and all 340 plus AHJs with a unified document that says we now have a plan that meets the most stringent requirements for all of you across the board. I can't get my head wrapped around that. The part B to that is there's also the time element of what we're working with, because out of all 700 plus of those groups of individuals that have an influence on building requirements and design requirements for their local area in the state, there's going to be some proportion of them that are adopting something new on January 1st or goes into effect March 1st between now and June 30th. Like, how do we address that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think you're spot on. Like, the idea of trying to satisfy everybody with this is an infeasibility in some ways. But what I would say does make a lot of sense, and I think Sam really enumerated this well in our first meeting, is that we need to find the places that are the good catch-alls, the 80%, right? That covers the vast majority of people. And with an intention like this, as far as this data gathering goes and sort of what I've presented to you, the idea is to draw the lines on the map of where we know we can work, and then where there might be dragons on the other side of that, so to speak, right? That are outside the bounds of something that fits easily into a box, and putting those parameters out there. So I think that, Donnie, I saw your hand go up. I didn't know if it was in reference to this comment as well, or if it was, something else here. But I would say that, yeah, I'm, as far as trying to shoot for pleasing everybody, I don't think that that's the goal, but I do think that creating circumstances where we have clear buckets of what's going to be effective for large swaths of the state, and I think we know that in our stick-built builders as well. I've had builders that have worked in a number of territories or jurisdictions in the metro area, and they're not necessarily building a significantly different building through a lot of that area. And of course, that's because, it's relatively static. And so we can take advantage of that to the best idea possible. I do agree, though, that, at the end of the day, there are, some that are going to have to fit into that site-specific, definition that was talked about with that maybe like class 5 or zone 5 idea, which that may have outcomes that leave some folks, I won't say dissatisfied, but as far as this first strike at this, getting that information to be able to substantiate where we can get most of the middle or most of the bell curve is really that focus. Does that answer your question, Dean? Or is that
it does. I mean, I think so. It sounds like we're going to have, some portion of the state that kind of fits into these buckets, and it will satisfy those jurisdictions. Where it does not, this is going to be what Donnie has previously described as zone 5. Like, it's still going to be a site-specific design no matter what you do. And I'm still not sure, like, even something as top level as the adopted code in a particular jurisdiction. Like, there are jurisdictions already in Colorado that have already moved to 2024. Well, because the state is on the 2021 code, does that mean those jurisdictions immediately are in this site-specific zone now because they have a different, they have what might be considered a more restrictive code or something like that? 'Cause I'm trying to tie back to the actual words of the legislation.
Mhm.
And
Let me take
are
a
we
step.
meeting the legislation requirements if they say satisfying the most stringent requirements, right? And I don't know how that gets resolved.
And so Dean, it's the most stringent design criteria, right? And so it's not the code set. So it's very clear in statute that we have the authority over the code set, which is, and like you said, we're on 2021, but it's that local design criteria. And if some of those local requirements are due to changes in their 24 adopted code set. This survey is, we're also trying to baseline what their current most stringent design criteria is, and the rationale behind that. Andre, this is your guys' time. I can call people for you, or you can just go down the list.
Sure. Donnie, please, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself here. So I kind of wanted to jump into kind of really touch on the topic of the meeting local requirements. You know, the part about, you know, meeting or exceeding that's, you know, that design criteria. And it specifies in that bill what design criteria we must meet or exceed. And for most of you all that are on this call that are TAC members, we've had one-on-one conversations. And part of those conversations is that, you know, we're not going to be able to satisfy every single jurisdiction, right? And, you know, I think we can, but we would have to go with the most stringent requirements of the code, right? We could say everything has to be fire suppressed, everything has to have wildfire mitigation, everything has to have radon protection, everything has to have fire separation between dwellings for ADUs, right? We can do all that, but I don't think that's the goal that we have, right? We're trying to come up with a process that a manufacturer can design to a specific region and say, like, hey, these are the designs that I would like to choose for this structure so that I can install it in these jurisdictions, right? And part of that conversation that I have with you all is that some of these items we can't, or it would be best that we defer some of these requirements, right? Like local fire suppression. You know, again, we can say everything is required to have fire suppression, or we can say, hey, if the locals require it, we will require it, right? But since we've adopted certain codes, they have to be done to those code requirements. Now, we do have to take certain things into consideration, and that's why we have, you know, the expertise on here for, you know, the types of things that they run into at the local level for fire suppression. Because what if somebody says, a local jurisdiction says, yes, residential structures are required to have fire suppression, but this structure is going in a location that they have a pond on site that they can utilize water for that fire suppression system, or they have to put a cistern, or they have to use a well, right? We don't have all that information during our plan review process, but the locals do, right? And so we have to make sure that we have to consider that instead of saying going with the most stringent and saying like everything needs to be fire suppression, right? So I think some things have to be deferred to the locals to meet that local's requirements. If we went with the most strict, we would meet every local jurisdiction like requirements or exceed them, right? And ultimately that's the goal, but I think we also don't want to impose a cost on a consumer to put in a fire suppression system for a unit that the locals wouldn't require it at the local level for site-built construction. So there are going to be some things I think that we're going to have to defer. But for the most part, code-wise, the structure has to comply with ours code as we adopt. But we will take the locals' design criteria in consideration so that we are meeting their local design criteria. So snow loads, wind loads, fire suppression, ADU separation, radon mitigation, their climate requirements for thermal insulation, right? You know, those are the things that we're going to take into consideration to meet or exceed the locals' requirements. And then the second thing that Dean was talking about was if the locals adopt a newer code. So this is where it gets a little tricky in my opinion, and you know I would like to hear your thoughts on it. And it might not be today's discussion, but future discussions is that, you know, the bill does say we have to meet or exceed the locals' design criteria. Now, I have done some research, and there is a change from the 2021 to 2024 when it comes to the ASCE reference standard. So it's no longer the 16, it's the 22. And so what I did is I went back in and I went through all those data points. Heather helped me out on some of those as well, but it took about 2 hours to get all the data points through that SEAC document. And in some cases, there's about a 20% reduction in snow loads. But there's also a 220% increase in snow loads in the most extreme cases, right? And so we're still looking into it and seeing what the new requirement is in the ASC 22. There are going to be some calculations that are going to be in there that have to be considered. But from my understanding, at least from what I found so far, is that residential construction will have a automatic reduction of, I believe, a 0.7. So you just multiply that ultimate snow load by 0.7, and that'll give you your residential snow load, which is basically 70% of that ultimate, which would be the ASD snow load requirement. And so some questions that we have is like, hey, if we're reducing that ultimate snow load, ground snow load for the residential, and it gives us a new ASD ground snow load, are we allowed to reduce that even further for a roof snow load, right? And then also for commercial, I think it's going to probably impact the commercial more than anything. There's still going to be reductions for the commercial because but you're ultimately having to use that ultimate design snow load for the ground snow load for that location to get that reduction. So we'll look into how that's going to affect both. But I think one of the things that we talked about with SHRMS CODA is creating two tables, one residential and one commercial. It wouldn't make sense to make one table at this point because there are specific information that commercial is going to have to comply with that is different than residential. So there most likely will be two tables that we'll create for this. But again, at least until somebody has another idea, I think we're still moving forward with the table that at least that skeleton layout of that table that we created and we proposed for the 5 regions, right? And that the way that table works is that it's going to have basically 4 zones that will fit a majority of Colorado, while that 5th zone is that catch-all. The ones that are going to exceed those 1 through 4 zones, or the ones that like, hey, I'm actually designing a structure that's going to be in between these zones, so I'm just going to go with zone 5 and build a structure that's site-specific, right? You can build to the most extreme cases and be in zone 5 across the board for an entire structure, and it'd be able to go into majority of jurisdictions depending on how high you went in those load calcs or the loadings for those or the design criteria for that structure. So if you just went to the most extreme snow load and the most extreme wind loads and the highest thermal zone, did fire suppression, did wildfire mitigation, added radon mitigation, added fire separation. If it was ADU, you did all the most extreme, that can probably go into 100% of the jurisdictions that are in Colorado, right? But I don't think that's what designers are trying to do. I think they're trying to find that middle ground, or they're trying to find a solution to build a structure that'll fit in a zone that doesn't significantly increase the cost of the construction of that building. So I think the table will work fine for now, unless somebody can come up with something different. But hopefully we come up with something at the end of this process that will fit what we're looking for. It might not be 100%, but it'll be what the intent of that bill is for. At least that's what I believe.
Donnie, I want to stop you. Tim had his hand up, and then I think he had to leave at 11:30, so I wanted to give him a minute.
Yeah.
I didn't. Donnie made my comment on the ASCE 722, so covered that for everybody who is actively moving towards the 2024 I codes like Broomfield is. So thanks, Donnie.
Yeah, and then just real quick on that part, the point that I was trying to make with that is that if the locals do adopt the 2024, although we are looking at although we have our own code that we're going to adopt the 2020 or that we have in place, right, the 2021, if the locals adopt the 2024 or newer, right, let's say they go to the 2027 and still using the ASC 22, within that code, their design criteria is going to change. And so that's something that we have to look into and see how that is going to affect our current tables. So we're looking into that now and trying to see how that's going to impact us. Because by the time this is effective, July 1st of next year, based on some conversations that I've had, there's going to be, possibly at least 20 plus known jurisdictions that are going to be adopting the 2024. just under one jurisdiction, right? Or one inspection authority that's working with them. So there's Tim Pate. I think you guys are going to the 2024 or 2027, right? There's probably other jurisdictions that are going to go right to the 2024 or 2027. And then also, I think some things that are going to kick in that is that there's the accessibility bill, right? You have to adopt one of the two most current versions of the code for accessibility. And if you're going to have to adopt the 2024 or 2027 to meet that requirement, most likely those jurisdictions are going to just adopt the codes across the board the same year, right? They're not going to just say, I'm going to do the 2021 on this and 2024 on that, right? They're probably just going to adopt the same code year across the board. So that's just things that we have to consider. And your design professionals, if you can think about ways that we can make that work, or again, do some research and seeing how much it's going to impact our current process right now, that help with the final product that we develop. That's it for me.
And Donnie, I will mention also that we have had some discussions on, if the source documents, and I'm calling them source documents for wind or snow or something are changed in a future code set, we need to figure out what our process looks like if we're going to change from a 21 to a 27 code set, right? Do our regions change dramatically? We probably need to, that should probably at least trigger a review of what our current region levels for wind or snow or what other unique design criteria are. We just went to 21. I don't see 24 in our near future, but maybe that's another point where we reassess what that level is and fine tune it. Now, we don't want to do that every year, certainly, because that's not the North Star. Or one of the guiding principles of this was to standardize for the manufacturers, and we've done that very effectively with the code set. We're on the 21 code set. That's what we're on. It's not the 24. It's not the most recent, but it's sure not 15 and 18 like some of the other jurisdictions are still on, right? So, it's at some point in time there may, and again, I go back to that source documents where they come up with the wind and snow load and how we factor that in. Other questions for Shums Coda? All right, Andre, Stephanie, Cole, thank you very much. Stick around for a minute or two in case somebody has a question. We will roll on through here. Our next meeting is November 26th. I've already talked about that. We'll do rulemaking 1.5 and rulemaking 2. And we will, and then here's our next set of meeting dates and times. The left side's been cleared out. That's great. That means we're halfway there, right? Well, not quite. We've still got a lot of work to do in rulemaking 1.5 and 2. We knew this time would be our hard time, our focus time. How did I raise my hand? I did not intend to do that. So we will keep going. I will now open it back up. If we had any questions on any of the discussion, third-party agencies or design criteria, Shums Coda will be back on the 26th, and we will dive down into some more of their stuff. And with that said, does anybody else have anything? All right. Well, thank you all very much. We're going to give you a little bit of time back for your schedule, and look for information for us at the end of the week on third-party agencies for sure. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to stop recording.